Hey, I'm Aubriana, and this is a conversation series with builders, leaders, and people shaping and studying the work of change across media, technology, and AI. We talk about what's really happening beyond the headlines, what's real, what's messy, and how people are thinking about transformation that actually makes a difference. Welcome to Agents of Change, Human in the Loop. Welcome. Today, I'm excited to be joined by Joanna Gerber. She's a journalist at AdExchanger. She spends her days talking to founders like me, operators, leaders, all across ad tech and AI. And Joanna has a really unique vantage point. She's not only building the tools herself, but she's hearing the stories, the patterns, the tensions, and probably, quite frankly, a lot of marketing fluff across the entire ecosystem. So, for today's conversation, we're really flipping the script. It's going to be a lot of fun and talking about what she's seeing emerge, what feels real versus maybe overhyped, and really just hear, how she's thinking about the broader impact of all of this change. So, Joanna, welcome to Agents of Change. Thanks so much for joining us.
Thanks so much for having me. I'm excited to be on the other side of the conversation for a change.
Yeah, this is going to be a lot of fun. Well, we know you talk to founders and operators really across AI and ad tech constantly, right? Like that's your day to day.
Of
You
course.
do an amazing job at it. And I just kind of wanted to know, like, how do you describe your role in this ecosystem and what gets you excited the most about having that vantage point?
Something that I think is really interesting is that I'm pretty much, on the younger side. I'm an older side of Gen Z, and a lot of my generation is very resistant to use of AI. And I actually generally choose not to use AI in my personal life either. So I think something that I really like about my role in the ecosystem is that it gives me a much more objective viewpoint on something I kind of had half-formed opinions on coming into this job, but now I understand it in a much more nuanced way. I think my role in the ecosystem is kind of just to share what I've learned as objectively as I possibly can, and make sure that in that objectivity, I'm bringing up the problems, bringing up the concerns, and bringing up the benefits and bringing up what's helping people. And I just really appreciate my vantage point because it gives me such a broad perspective that I think it gives both my compliments and my critiques a little bit more weight because I've really seen kind of the whole gamut.
Yeah, I love that. And I love that you're kind of like part of this resistance group, right? That's
I think
pushing
it's fun
back.
to report on something that you don't 100% love or support all the time because I think it makes you a more critical journalist and reporter. I think it makes me ask better questions and probably write better stories, I would hope.
Absolutely. Do you think it's going to change your opinion at all at some point?
I think in some ways it has. I
Okay.
think I've really come to understand the distinction much more clearly between generative AI, in a creative sense, which, as a writer, I'm a little bit more resistant towards, versus kind of more of the machine learning data analysis, which I don't think I used to think of that as AI because AI to so many people who aren't in this industry just think of that as ChatGPT. And I think it's just made me understand that there's a lot more nuance to what AI can, should, and will do.
Yeah. And I'm sure that you have so much creativity that even if you were to use AI, you are actually imposing your thoughts on how it's forming what you already know, right? But today we're flipping the script a little bit, right? So
Yeah.
you're usually asking the questions. Now you're sitting across me. I'm asking the question, what's it feeling like to be on the other side of this conversation?
I mean, I told you before we started, I get a little nervous being on camera. I get a little nervous being the one who's expected to think on the fly. Honestly, it gives me so much respect for the people I interview day in and day out. Everyone is just so quick on their feet. And I'm like, how do you guys do this all the time?
Ugh.
But I'm also excited, and I think it'll be a little bit fun because, as I was saying, part of being a reporter is trying to, stick to the facts, keep it objective. Obviously, AdExchanger likes to throw in our jokes and our snark, but I think it'll be fun to kind of put my perspective and my kind of more, personal opinions out there for a change.
Absolutely. Well, I think that you make it easy to have a conversation with you, so I have a lot of respect for that. It's always comfortable being on the
Do
other
my
side of
best.
you. So hopefully I can do you justice today, right? All right. So I want to talk about the conversations that you're having from a pattern perspective, right? Like what are some of those themes that you're starting to see that are repeating themselves over and over again?
Well, you wouldn't believe this, but every company I've ever talked to has actually been the first to do exactly what they're doing. Um, Half joking, definitely a pattern of people thinking they're the first to do anything ever. I think that more seriously in the past, whatever, 9 months maybe since I've started at AdExchanger, fully agentic workflows have become something from kind of a pipe dream to a pretty standard reality. Like people are now generating briefs, uploading those briefs, having an AI tool analyze the brief and come up with a campaign plan, create the creative sometimes, sometimes not, depending on, the specific brand or agency's desires, A/B test it, put it out on the right channels based on the audiences, and then do it all again based on the data they've recorded. And I think that, 6, 7 months ago, that was kind of early stages. And now more and more companies I'm talking to, more and more brands I've spoken to have started to adopt tools like that. I think the other big thing that everyone seems to be in agreement on, regardless of their particular stance on AI or how they're using it, is that it should and is being used to eliminate the grunt work that nobody else wants to be doing, which is a lot of just like the data analysis, trying to find these teeny tiny patterns that maybe the human eye can't even catch. I think A/B testing is a really big thing, saying like, oh, were our ads running better in the morning or at night? Are we sure it was because it was running at night, or was it actually because somebody had green on their shirt instead of blue? Like, those are really, really hard things, I think, for the human eye to catch. And I think that was probably one of the first things I noticed that pretty much everybody was on board with using.
Yeah, for sure. Well, I think going back to your, first point about every company being the first, I think you have to have like this a little bit unsensical ego about you to found a company because you're going
Yeah.
out and like facing your worst fears every day, right? But it's true, like everybody's doing their first and everybody's doing it a little differently, which makes it interesting and exciting. It also makes it really hard to compare yourself to others, which, from a people perspective is great, but I think from a business perspective is complicated as people want to invest.
Yeah.
Who do they compare you against? I think everybody, whether that's a brand or an agency or data platforms, trying to put categories together and compartmentalize these companies. And
Yeah.
we've been doing that across ad tech for a long time, and now we have to figure out how to do that with these new native AI companies that are emerging out. But I think that presents obviously a fair amount of signal, but also an immense amount of noise. So, when it
Yes.
comes to AI in our industry, what do you think is feeling like real and durable that's going to last, and what feels a little bit more like narrative than reality?
It's a really, really good question. So kind of as I mentioned, I think A/B testing is one of the things that is feeling extremely durable, extremely useful, and genuinely doing what people are kind of claiming they want AI to be doing all the time. It's saving them time and incredible tedium. I think that creative versioning is pretty similar. Like, again, I think I personally have more resistance to AI completely generating creative from scratch, though we can get more into that later. I think the other complication there is time, resources, money, smaller businesses, giving them a leg up. We'll get into this later. But I do think that like the tiny creative versions, that's definitely being implemented and is helpful. Targeting, helping kind of draw parallels between people to curate more specific audiences or audiences that we might not have otherwise seen. And cleaner data, I think, is another easy one, just kind of polishing the data that we already have and turning it into something usable. What feels a little bit more like narrative, I think, is one thing AI generated creative that's, ready to go.
Mm,
You can make realistic, I think, AI creative at this stage. I don't think you can make creative AI generated creative. You can make it look like a real person, maybe, but it's not going to have heart, it's not going to have spirit, it's not going to have character. And I think maybe down the road, people believe that there are tools that might be able to. I think that remains to be seen. But I do think that right now, there are some things that still require a human's oversight, a human's input, a human's revisions, and not admitting that is hubris that's going to kick your ass, respectfully. I think another thing that is really up in the air still is kind of adding on to that, the role of the human.
mhm,
A lot of people kind of say a lot of, oh, we want human in the loop, but we also want fully agentic. But we're also not trying to take away jobs. But also, this is going to take a team of 10 people and turn it into a team of one person. And it all feels very paradoxical. Like you can't have all of those things. And I think marketers are trying to make the best marketing they can and also probably do it as cheaply and efficiently as possible. But nobody wants to admit that is going to eventually require fewer people. And I also think that some of it isn't just not wanting to admit it, it's genuine uncertainty and hesitancy about, yeah, like we do have all these new tools and they are doing things that humans could do. Does that mean that humans don't have a role in that task anymore? Or does it mean that the role humans now have in that task is a role that hasn't been developed yet? Like, I know people, whenever people say I'm going to date myself, that means I'm going to show how old I am. I'm going to date myself in the opposite direction to show that I'm still a baby. Like, I don't remember a time really before the internet, but I know that I'm sure, millions of jobs that exist today could not have existed without the internet because we needed all of these, new people creating website domains, figuring out how the internet worked, building, like, I don't know, code. Like, these things weren't relevant before. But at the dawn of the new creation, nobody knows what those jobs are going to become. And I think that's probably the biggest question mark in the space right now.
Yeah, I always wonder, like, is there going to be a time, fast forward 5, 10 years, where right now we call out things we're like, oh, that's AI generated creative.
Yeah.
That's, definitely not a human. And we can kind of pick those out. But as the technology improves, it's harder and harder to pull that out. And I wonder if
Oh,
we're
yeah.
going to reach a point where we're going to be like, oh my gosh, this is 100% human. Like, is there going to, the
Oh, I think
brands
we
breaking the
absolutely
internet
have
are going
had
to
those
be like,
moments.
oh, they actually like went in and did a full on production with real humans, no AI, like that will be, it's like
Oh,
what
like
old
that's the
is new
shocking
again.
thing.
Nothing
Yeah.
new under the sun, right? It's going to just regenerate itself where we're in this place where here we are, like, oh, wow, they used AI completely. And now we're saying, oh, no, they used human connection completely. And I recently was on a panel where we were talking about this. And I do think that there's going to be a shift in jobs, but perhaps it's just shifting to other industries, right? Like maybe we improve our healthcare industry because that needs more hands-on workers as there's
Mhm.
more, retirees and people who need more care than ever, right? That generation is massive. And
Yeah.
so perhaps it's just shifting. I don't know that it's going away because there's still so much that really needs that human connection and care. I mean, I'm an optimist, so I'm hoping that's true,
You
but
are one of the most optimistic people I know in the industry, and it is like honestly, it's like very refreshing to hear. I'm like, you're right. Maybe we will just fix the US healthcare system because of AI. Like it is possible.
oh goodness, a girl can dream, right? I mean, somebody's got to be like the dreamer over here. But
Yeah, no.
I mean, do you think that leaders are talking about this, like the human side of change beyond just efficiency or automation? Are they really being realistic with themselves, or are they just trying to fit every narrative if they can?
So you asked two different questions. One was, are they talking about it? And one was, are they being realistic about it?
Yeah.
Yes, they're talking about it. I think it's hit or miss about the realisticness. Honestly, one of the first things that struck me the first time you and I spoke was how genuinely committed you seem to be to the human side of things. I remember you said something that really stuck with me about like humans weren't necessarily made to be paper pushers and bricklayers. Like they were meant to connect and be creative. And I think there are people who are very AI driven who believe exactly what you believe, which is that the more we can automate these more kind of, thankless tasks, the more we can connect with each other and maybe put more time and resources and energy into, you know, either creative tasks and or tasks that directly help other people, like you're saying, like healthcare. Um, I talked to a woman in the UK many, many months back and distinctly remember her saying that now her team just there's not fewer of them. They're not getting paid less. They just leave the office earlier. And I
Mm,
was like, wow, sounds awesome. Like,
I love that. Do
I
you think
don't
our
see why not
American
either.
culture will like actually
Nope, I
cling to
don't.
that? I
I
hope
was like,
so.
oh, that is a distinctly European experience, isn't it?
Yes. Yes.
Yeah, I mean, I think that there's a lot of talk about reducing redundancies, and then people like to tack on, and that'll give people more creative opportunities. But I'm not sold on it a lot of the time because once I press and say, what creative opportunities is that going to provide? What are you going to free up the time to do? The answer usually is just kind of like, oh, they can fix the pre-existing AI creative or they can generate a new idea. And I'm like, that's not new. They were already doing that. You're just taking out a step. And again, I'm not saying it's necessarily bad to take that step out, but I don't think we've figured out what we can do with the extra time. And people say a lot of the time, like, oh, we still care about human in the loop for now. But there's a lot of people saying the for now, like maybe eventually we won't need a human in the loop, which to
Mhm.
me means that it's not about the human, it's about the quality of the AI. And I think those are, even though it comes down to the same thing, yes, there's a human oversight right now. I think it's very different to say we're keeping a human in the loop because we value human perspective versus we're keeping a human in the loop because the AI isn't strong enough yet.
Maybe it's a little bit of both. I mean, it's still really frustrating to not speak to a real human when you have a problem. Like whether that's with, some software that you're licensing or your website or like whatever it may be in your life, you really just want to have somebody real on the other end of the phone that you can.
Ain't that the truth?
It's tough. I mean, even like ordering food, right? The AI systems actually do a pretty good job. I'm not
Oh
against
yeah.
it, but would I have rather had a conversation with a person, to refine that my wings, I wanted them extra crispy? Yeah, actually, I would have, but here we are.
Thanks to AI, you have soggy wings.
No, they got him right. They got it right. Like it was
Oh, okay,
amazing.
okay.
So I'm like, okay, this actually works. I was impressed. And it's like a little mom and pop bar down the street. So I'm like, this is actually really interesting that even small
Hmm.
shops like this are starting to adopt AI in in this capacity, where especially when you think about the impacts of like what COVID and everything did on our industry, especially the restaurant industry, like that's great to see that they're able to thrive and maybe do more with less.
Yeah.
It's hard for so many of them to stay alive, right? So I think those are like the ones that you pull out and you're like, that's great. And human interaction would still be better. So I think things like that really create this honest tension that are happening all across the board. And so, what tensions or contradictions are you noticing that don't always make it into published stories without
Yeah.
naming names?
No, I mean, honestly, I don't even like have names that come to mind. A lot of these are just larger trends. I think it's honestly exactly what I just said before. I think I dove too deep into that. But I think one of the biggest kind of contradictions is valuing the importance of human in the loop while saying, in a perfect world, humans will never have to touch this. And I think you really can't have that both ways. Honestly, I do think that is the biggest one. I'm trying to think if there are other things.
Capitalism at its best.
I mean, yeah. I think that's another contradiction is saying we're going to use these new tools to kind of, that's a huge one, actually, free up people's times so they can go do things they enjoy more, appreciate more. But it's eliminating jobs. And this is actually a conversation you and I had last week over coffee. But we were saying, like, in an idealistic world, it would be great if we could take away some of these less enjoyable jobs and free up people's time to do things they're passionate about. But we also live in a world where you need a job to make money and survive, which becomes a contradiction in and of itself. Like, great, your time is freed up, but you still need a salary. Can you get a salary doing something you care about? Or was it true that that job you didn't like all along, or the parts of the job you didn't like all along, were actually the only thing keeping you afloat? Which isn't just an AI problem. That's, I think, a larger systemic economic issue, but we don't have enough time to get into all of the flaws within the American capitalist society. So,
Very true. Well, I mean, let's stay a little bit on the responsibility and impact
yeah,
area and think about like, you mentioned your age and how you have a very unique perspective considering like most of the people are my age and maybe a little bit older that are founding these companies and in this industry. But, as somebody who's like watching this unfold in real time, how do you think about responsibility or the impact when it comes to AI, the systems that we're building? Like, how do you
yeah.
really feel about AI and its future impact, perhaps beyond this little industry?
So I think beyond this little industry is a very crucial part because the more I spend time in this industry, the more I'm looking at the pros of AI, the more I'm seeing that AI really does benefit ad tech in certain ways. I think on a larger scale is where it really starts to freak me out a bit more, specifically on an environmental scale. I think one thing that if anyone listening to this is building their own AI, like one thing I would really like this industry to reckon with more is not just what AI does, but how it functions, which is to say, like, it is using water, it is using data centers. These data centers are, based on a little bit of reading I've done, generally placed in low income neighborhoods and jacking up those people's electric bills. So even if AI is doing good things, it's being kind of built on the backs of people who don't really have a say in the matter. And I think that's, I think, my concern more than the tools themselves. I think my concern is that it is, the infrastructure behind AI is flawed. And that's something that I think we're all very resistant to acknowledge because it is helping a lot of people. But you're kind of weighing the pros and cons of like, great, it can help people in this way, but by nature of doing so, it's also harming other people. And of course, I think that's probably the question at the crux of most ethical dilemmas in the entire world, right? Like, I don't know. I've been reading and watching a lot of like sci-fi apocalyptic media lately. I think it's really starting to get to me. But that's something I think about a lot with AI. And also my main concern with, I'd say, day-to-day generative AI is that I've also seen some pretty scary stats about the way that ChatGPT and similar bots are like affecting people's memories. And that if you use AI to, say, generate a paragraph for an essay you're writing, 5 minutes later, people have an intense amount of chat like struggle to recall what they wrote or generated because they're not paying the same level of attention to it that they would have if they had written it themselves. So obviously, I'm not going to fault somebody for being like, I really want to know what sneaker to buy. Like, help me decide which sneaker to buy. But I do want to make sure that like our own critical thought and skills to write and create and engage are not going away.
Yeah, I think that's so important. I love that perspective. Thanks for sharing that. Looking ahead, when you look out, let's say 12 to 24 months, what are you most curious to see play out? Not in a prediction manner, but just like your
Okay.
open questions.
Um, I'm really curious about what we were saying earlier. What new jobs have we not thought of yet that are going to exist because of AI? Like, there's absolutely going to be some, as I said, like it happens with every new invention, but I don't know. Like, I'm not an engineer. I have no idea what that's going to look like. And I think it's going to be fun to see what new roles start to exist. And I'm also curious if the term AI is going to become too broad and we're going to need, like even now we talk about generative AI versus machine learning. How much more are we going to break those terms down to really narrow into the type of machine we're talking about? How many variations on AI are there going to be in, 5 years, 2 years?
Yeah. I sometimes I wonder, I mean, it's hard. Well, you mentioned the news and like the apocalyptic sense of it, right? And it's really hard to watch any news that's happening today and not feel that the weight of that I feel is happening. So it's maybe just all around us, whether you're actually seeking it out or not. But I wonder sometimes, like, is our jobs of the future actually going to be what the jobs of the past were, where we are farming our own, produce and growing our own food because everything else has been so flawed, to this point because of
Mm,
the systems that we've put in place. And now the jobs of tomorrow are actually the jobs of yesterday. And I would also
okay.
say that's just like a weird thought in my
That
mind.
was interesting. Yeah.
I would also say I think there has been a whole host of jobs that have opened up because of AI, because every other person on LinkedIn is now an AI expert and they can actually consult your business and help you get AI ready, from what I see.
Yes, absolutely.
Okay, well, a little bit of personal reflection as we wrap this up. Like, what's one thing that you've learned from doing this work, maybe that's changed about how you think about the future?
I think it has made me both more understanding and more critical, which I love. I really, really love doing this work. I think it gives me so much insight into an industry that is constantly in flux and constantly changing. I feel like now more than ever is one of those tropey terms, but really now more than ever. I think it's helped me understand why people are so excited by AI and by, just emergent technology in general. I'm not someone with a tech background. Tech has always been kind of, abstract to me. Like obviously I use it in my day-to-day life, but the nuances of the before and after are really clear to me now. And I think I'm really able to understand the excitement in a new way. And I also think it's helped my critiques be more relevant. Like I think, what I just said to you about ChatGPT and data centers and also critical thinking and human in the loop and jobs, like before it was this abstract idea of like, I want to think for myself. And now I'm like, okay, I really do understand the distinction between different uses of AI and which of those I think are impeding me from, thinking on my own and which of those I think genuinely are an asset. And I think I've just said I think so many times in a row. But
You
I
think a lot.
really
That's a really good
I do
quote.
think a lot. It's true. Sometimes I think a little too much. But yeah, my perspective has gotten a lot more fleshed out, and that's something I'm really appreciative about.
Well, I know the industry appreciates you. So obviously the podcast is called Agent of Change, Agents of Change, a human in the loop. We are humans in the loop here in this conversation. So what does being an agent of change mean to you right now? Like in practice, what does that mean?
I think it means honesty, sometimes at the cost of doing something that is really scary that might get backlash. Like something I've been reckoning with a lot lately is I have a voice and I have a platform to an extent. It's not my platform, it's AdExchanger's platform, but my voice is on there. And I'm writing a lot about AI. And as I said, there are also qualms I have with it. And trying to strike that balance of making sure that not like you're just insulting people for the sake of insulting people. I'm not trying to insult any individual people, but just acknowledging the fact that, the tools we're using are flawed. They have negative repercussions. And looking at the world at large, like as you said, there's a lot happening in the news right now. Like we have seen, what ICE is doing to innocent people around the country. And speaking out about that, even when it doesn't seem like it directly plays into your job or your industry, I think is really the most important way of making change right now. It's just talking about things in moments that might seem quote unquote inappropriate, because at a certain point, the real world is always going to be more important than a LinkedIn post.
I agree. I think that's so important. I love that you called that out. I think the systems are flawed because they're created by humans and humans are flawed. And
Famously.
and even as flawed as we are, we can still stand up and say something and do what's right when it counts. So I love you bringing
Yeah.
that.
I do think that something that's been a tiny bit heartening in this like very disheartening week has been seeing how many people are speaking out and coming together and protesting and, just messaging each other and checking it. Like, in a way, it's disheartening. So you're like, wow, everyone can come together and the few people in power can still make bad choices. But it is nice to really see such a large contingent of people with pretty disparate views coming together and unifying. And I think that's something that's rare to see.
Yeah, it is. It is certainly like gives you hope, right? We
A
need
little
that.
bit.
All
It
right. So
does.
before we wrap, I want to ask everyone who comes on this show to leave a question for the next guest, maybe someone
Ooh,
else that's acting as an agent of change. So I wanted to ask you, what's one question? I'm putting you on the spot. What's one question that you think more people should be asking themselves as they build, study, or shape change right now?
that is an awesome question. I think it's a two-part question. Who is being helped by this and who is being hurt by this? And if anyone is being hurt by it, is there a way that they could also be helped by it?
Love that. So good. Thank you so much, Joanna. You have been an inspiration. This has been fun, conversational. I'm really appreciative of your time. And everyone who's watching, thank you for your time and tuning in.
Thank you so much for having me.